Hello, friends, and welcome to the Little Woman podcast. I'm Niina, your host. Dana and I will continue our chat about the 1949 Little Woman. I am currently reading the annotated edition of Little Woman by Daniel Shealy, one of my all-time favorite alt schoolers. I thought I would read you a few tidbits. Here's one about Meg's glove. Quote, Laurie has told Joe that John Brooke has been keeping one of Meg's gloves in his pocket. Gloves have been associated with love. During the Middle Ages, a knight would often carry a lady's glove into a battle as a token of his love. In the 19th century, paper valentines in the shape of gloves were popular, as was the following verse. If that form's glove you take, the letter G, then glove is love that I sent to thee. Isn't that cute? I really need to buy this book to myself. It has been on my list for the longest time. There's a copy of it on the Internet Archive, so if any one of you is interested, I highly recommend. And it was published in 2013. And there are some photos from the movies as well, like the 1994, 33, and 49. Here are some quotes from the chapter Little Faithful. Notes from Mr. Shealy. Little Faithful is the one where Beth becomes sick with scarlet fever. Quote, Beth's uncharacteristic slowness to come to the aid of others suggests she is already suffering symptoms of scarlet fever. Were her sisters less self-involved, they might have taken notice that something was terribly wrong. And here's another. In June 1856, Louisa May Alcott arrived home, quote, to find dear Betty very ill with scarlet fever. Quote, from some poor children mother nursed when they fell sick, living over a cellar where pigs had been kept. Oh gosh, that's terrible. Children living in the cellar. The landlord, a deacon, would not clean the place till mother threatened to sue him for allowing a nuisance. Let's just give a shout out to Abigail Alcott. That's insane. What a brave woman. Too late to save two of the poor babies, or Lizzie and May, from the fever. Elizabeth Alcott would never fully recover from the lingering effects of scarlet fever. She died in Concord on March 14, 1858. The use of belladonna, or the deadly nightshade, helped from the basis for homeopathic medicine. Poisoning produced by the plant resembles the symptoms of scarlet fever. The leaves and the roof of the plant were pulverized and the juice seeped into alcohol and eventually filtered and diluted to treat scarlet fever. I did not know that. There's a picture of Joan Parker in the 1933 Little Woman. Louisa May noted the effect of Elizabeth's illness on the family in June 1856. An anxious times, like the quiet, shy Beth in the novel, Lizzie, as she was called by her family and friends, seemed very much a shadowy figure in Louisa's life. Born on June 24, 1835 in Boston, Elizabeth would always be the spiritual, ethereal child of the family. Called Psyche by her father, Lizzie affected all of the Alcott's lives. She would be the angel in the house, as Louisa calls her in Little Woman. Almost 18 years later, the family, now relocated to High Street in Boston, were all busy, with Anna and Louisa keeping school for 5 students in the family. Lizzie, Louisa noted, was our little housekeeper, our angel in cellar kitchen. The following year, quote, Betty was still the home bird. At one point, Louisa called her, in 1854, Cinderella, implying that she was the sister, like the fairy tale character, continually performing housework, while the others were out in the working world. End quote. So many fairy tale references in Little Woman and in Louisa May Alcott's works. Last winter, I was reading the biography of May Alcott by Caroline Ticknor. You can also find that from Internet Archive. I love the Internet Archive. This is not a paid promotion. But anyway, there were some really interesting quotes that the sisters had written when they were younger, and they wrote about the books they had been reading. Lizzie had been reading Arabian Nights and made some remarks about it. I thought it was really sweet. Maybe I will chat about that in some other episode. I thought those were really cute little glimpses into lives of the Alcott sisters and Marmee as well. But how crazy is that? Children living in the cellar. I'm shaking my head here. Now let's get back to the podcast. In this episode, we discuss the differences between the films and the book. This is the Little Woman podcast. Have films reduced Little Woman to a modern rom-com? Enjoy! Sometimes.
I don't know. I feel like sometimes I notice that like when you watch them, one of these days I kind of want to do like a time mark where when do they start talking about, or when do they kind of move on to, part two? Because I feel like sometimes the films spend so much time focusing on when they're younger.
I agree with
because a lot of things obviously happen when they're growing up. That like by the time they get to when they're now, if you want to say like Meg's wedding, which kind of starts part two, it's like once they get there, it always feels like there's not a lot of time left in the movie, but they don't have a lot of time to go through things. It gets really compressed where you don't get a lot of Laurie and Amy, you don't get a lot of Joe and Friedrich, you don't get a lot of this stuff, so that when them together, you're just kind of like, you don't have all this time to get used to it. I mean, in the 49 film, I don't even really think you see a lot of Amy and Laurie together at all.
No.
Which is a total shame. I mean, I know when she comes to York with Aunt March, she knew what was going on, that Laurie had been traveling, but you don't see like any of them together, so that when they come home towards the end and like they're married, I'm not surprised people would have been like, well, this doesn't make any sense. And it's like, well, actually it does, but they just don't show you that it does. And that's one of the reasons I was actually really looking forward to like the PBS series from 2017, because I was thinking like, ooh, like we're getting 3 hours worth of this. They're going to have time to tell all these stories. And I feel like you do get, some of Laurie and 8, but like you don't see like the professor until like episode 3. And again, it's just like this like compressed, and it's like you had 3 hours to tell this story and you still couldn't put in a little bit more effort to give us like what we wanted.
Yeah. I felt exactly the same. I was looking forward. Oh, I'm going to get like 55 minutes of Joe and Friedrich. Like, dream on. He was there like 5 minutes. And it was a shame because the actor was great. There was so much potential, so many things that they could have done with them. And it also like Laurie going to work and the time that he spends in Vienna, but it seems to be every freaking film.
Yeah, I mean, the film is just kind of, like you said, like they gloss over just certain aspects. And I don't know, like I always just feel like, the story's called Little Women. It's about growing up, but it just always feels like, it just feels like, it's like once Meg gets married, it's like the movies go like, well, we don't really want to show up dog up anymore. But like, that's the point. Like they're still young, like there's still, more to their story and falling in love. But then at the same time, like they also kind of romanticize like the story itself. It's like this weird, like they don't want to show, especially like, two of the sisters. And for the most part, it feels like the films, despite it being called The Little Women about the 4 sisters, the rest of the films focus a little bit more on Joe than any of the other sisters. It's like they romanticize a story where like if you're watching like a modern day rom-com and you have your meet cute where your characters meet for the first time and Joe and Laurie are best friends, like, and who wouldn't want them to get together?
Yeah.
It's like, are you admitting the growth of these characters because you wanted was kind of force a more modern take on them, because then like we get to the end, and for a lot of people who haven't read the book, they're dissatisfied with Joe marrying this stuffy professor. When she could have had her best friend from next door.
Even in the novel, the first part, Joe and Laurie, they are not that great. They're not the greatest influence for each other. Like that part of Joe saying to Laurie, maybe you should run away. And he's like, maybe I should. He's not capable to look after himself. And then Meg is like, no, you can't run away. You need to go to school. Your grandfather, he needs you. And there's a lot of that in the novel, but
He's just so melodramatic.
Yeah. He's very Goethean character. There's lots of mood changes with Laurie all the time. And there's some part of him that enjoys that role of being this very melodramatic person. But it's funny because when I did my research on Laurie, I couldn't find any separate studies made about his character that weren't related to Amy or Joe. Like I could find separate studies made about Professor Riddick, different aspects of him that some Alcott schoolers have studied, but there wasn't anything on Laurie. Why parts of him are not discussed more? Well, we are doing that now.
His character, he goes through, I know obviously the story is more about like the sisters, and they grow so much and they have these arcs. Well, so does Laurie. And if you make him this important character, to this quartet, and I mean, and in the book, like he does grow. He's kind of like the only like boy in the story. I mean, at this point, I mean, he could, John's older, so he's already, somewhat of a young man. As you read this, he knows who he is, and he's already kind of set into who he's gonna be, going forward. And so that's kind of, the appeal, like with the sisters, is you're watching them grow and learn who they're gonna be. You watch Laurie do the same thing. So it's kind of sad that you don't get to see that in the films. I mean, like, the only thing you ever really see is he's all mopey after Joe dumps him. Then he decides, okay, fine, then I'm going to go to work. Like, if I can't have her, I'm going to work. And then next thing you know, he's like married to Amy. There's a lot more that connects these dots with each other. And yeah, I don't know why the filmmakers or the writers like why they leave this out.
Yeah, and I think Greta Gerwig said that, Laurie wants Joe to be the grown-up, and I'm like, that's the opposite than what happens in the novel. I don't get it.
And then like to the same extent, like the way you don't see, any growth for Laurie or any arc that, kind of connect him more to Amy. And the same kind of goes for like Joe and the professor. I've always loved the professor. He's always been one of my favorites. And so it's always, it's always kind of frustrating when you see when you watch it and it's like you just want more.
Oh, very true.
And I mean, like, yeah, I know she meets him toward, in the second half, so you don't get as much like time as like her like being with Laurie, who was like there from like the beginning. And then what also kind of stinks too is you don't get a lot of what happens afterwards. That really, when you start navigating into like Little Men and Joe's Boys territory, where you really see what a good match they are with each other. And so I think, for a lot of like, the audiences, like they watch they'll watch the movie where you don't get a lot of time with Joe and Friedrich. And then the next thing you know, like, they're married and like, that's it. Or the professor love to each other pretty much because you don't even see them get married. And you don't see anything beyond that. And like the book doesn't just end with, I have nothing to give you, my hand to you, not empty now. It doesn't end there. The 2017 kind of does it. Them at Humboldt. You could tell the passage of time, one with like their costumes. I do not for a second when I watched that part of that maybe believe that those actors are supposed to be the ablers. You could do their hair a certain way. You could put them in that like 1870s clothes, but they do not look any different than they did in the beginning of the movie.
So true.
Amy's hair is, oh goodness. I mean, the only time Amy's hair looks worse is, I guess, quote unquote, young Amy in the 1978 miniseries because her girls are, they're fantastic. But I do at least like that they include that you, Daisy and Demi are old. You can see Beth, after Barney makes that comment about her, like, oh, she's looking better, like, letting you, she was, I believe in the book, she was a little frail. And I love not only, be quiet. I know you're excited. I'm excited too. I love that you not only see Franz and Nikhil, because I get real excited when those nephews pop up. Get excited because a part of why Friedrich is in the United States. Oh, I love that you get to see Rob and Teddy at the end of that movie, or the end of that miniseries. And I know that's kind of what the 2019 film was going for towards like the end, but that ending that's a completely different story. With the 49 film, I do really like Joe and Friedrich in it.
I think they do really good job developing their relationship in that film.
Yeah, in the short amount of time that they have. And I think one of my favorite scenes of them together is when they're coming home or coming back to the boarding house from the opera. And in that scene alone, they're able to convey that not only did they go to the opera, but they went to a lot of plays with each other. So they spent time. And I like how Friedrich, he doesn't, like what Joe's like, oh, like, I'm going to keep up writing and become a singer. And like, he doesn't laugh at her. He's just like, well, you wanted to be this when we went here. And then you wanted to be this when we went here. But he never like makes fun of her. He just is kind of like he's validating kind of what she's saying. Like, but I love that it kind of builds with what little time they really give them. It builds that relationship where you could tell, oh, even though we didn't see it, like they're spending a lot of time together.
In the novel, Friedrich is written to be this very kind person. I really like that in the 1949 film, Rossana Brassi's Friedrich, he's like made of sweetness. He's super a sweet person, very supportive. So he's, in that sense, very similar to the book Friedrich, even though he doesn't look like him. But there's that certain character essence there. 1949 film, it's one of the only adaptations that show that Friedrich sometimes feels himself isolated in New York. So when Jo comes, she's like a breath of fresh air for him.
Well, and I think you kind of see that loneliness when she comes across him in, I believe it's the parlor when he's piano. He's just by himself and he's just, playing the piano, singing a song, probably thinking about home and where he's from. And it's a really nice moment that they share with each other, because he gets to share a piece of himself with her, and you could tell how like Jo, she can relate to it. It's a really sweet moment. They don't go into more of like I know like the 94 version does more of like thought process with a lot of things is the same. The 49 film is at least still showing you like these two get each other.
They do bits of the transcendentalist themes, but it's very subtle, and it happens through the music, because when they got the opera, it is a opera that is based on Goethe's play, and when he sings the song with the piano, it's also composed by Goethe, or it's based on some of Goethe's novels. So there's a connection to Louisa May Alcott, because Friedrich is based on Goethe. He was one of the inspirations. So there is a bit of a transcendentalist connections there.
I was reading something the other day, actually, where the 49 film is kind of a remake of the 33. A lot of the same scripts, they use a lot of the same music. And one of the things I was reading was saying how in the 33 film, that the actor he played, Friedrich, played obviously the piano, and he, in that scene, he's singing the song.
Yeah.
But that he translated it.
Oh.
Like he translated it into English, because I was really curious about what that song sounded like. So I went down a little rabbit hole where I was listening to, like what because it, different composers composed music to it, and according to them, that version is based off of like the Tchaikovsky musical, which I didn't even know that like Frank Sinatra sang a version of that song in English.
Yeah, the Tchaikovsky music, I think it's based on Mignon's song, which is from Goethe's. It's from Goethe's Wilhelm Meister's Apprenticeship. And that was one of the Louisa May Alcott's favorite novels. Really interesting.
He sang it in German and he translated it into English. And so I'm assuming they use like the same version in the 49 film. But yeah, it's always a shame when they don't get kind of like the justice that's deserved to them. You get so many people who, like when I talked to my sister last night, I'm like, with so many movies and TV series or book series, like with pop culture, you find like that the fandoms, they have their pairings, they shipped these characters together, or this is like their one pairing and whatnot. And I'm like, you don't necessarily think of like Little Women being one of those books where people do that with, but they do. But it's normally just Joe and Laurie. And it's just like when you find fans, it's like you either find fans that are Joe and Laurie fans, or you find fans that are like Joe and, Friedrich fans. And the Joe and Friedrich fans, it's like this much smaller group.
I think it's caused by the films, really. I think it's because they romanticize Joe and Laurie so much. They never really show the reasons why Joe dumps him. And there are a lot of reasons.
Yeah, especially like when you watch the scenes where, Laurie professes his love to her.
Yeah.
And like the reasons that they get, that Joe gives a lot of the times. I know like one of the things you'll hear a lot is, when she says, well, we'd fight all the time. And a lot of times like you sit there and you think, but they don't really show them fighting a lot. To a lot of people, that doesn't make sense, but it's like, no, they do fight because they think differently on quite a few things. It's almost kind of the beauty of their friendship, because like you think of like when you have a friend, when a true friend, you're not afraid to be honest with them. And I don't think Joe's afraid to be honest with Laurie. If he did something wrong, like when he wrote those letters to Meg pretending to meet John, or something that she's not afraid to go and tell him like, dude, like that, what are you doing? You don't see that aspect of their relationship, and they just show this friendship where they just continuously get along, which like I said earlier, that's kind of by like, even though it's not really an argument, I like in the 49 film, at least in multiple points in the movie, they kind of have that disagreement, for lack of a better term, when it comes to her writing. And it's important that they show that, because it's showing like, look, like they're on different wavelengths for certain things. But yeah, and like you watch these scenes where, he's pouring his heart out to her, but then at the same time, he's like being so dramatic, where I think like the 33, 49, and the 94, they all kind of have like the same dialogue. And I haven't read that scene in the book for a long time, so I mean, it may be straight from the book or variations of it. Laurie always says, oh, you think you'll never find anybody, but you will, and you'll love him, and you'll live for him. I'll be hanged if I stay at the body watch. Like every single conversation, it seems like I'll be hanged. It's like, you're gonna die if you see her with somebody else. Like, she's your best friend. You should want her to be happy. I'm sorry she's not happy with you that way.
Yeah, and people romanticize that kind of behavior. It's really worrying. And another part that separates them is their views on education, because like we said, Laurie takes his education for granted, and he doesn't really like school at all. And Joe would like to go to school, but that's another pinning point between Joe and Friedrich.
Well, and that's even, I mean, like the 94 version, when he's going to college, even said, she said, I'll commit murder to go to college because she wants to learn. And she, because of, her place in the world, it's funny when you think of that time and how like women, couldn't go to college, but they could be governesses. You're going to have them teach children, but like, they're going to get to a point where like, I can't teach beyond this because I don't know beyond this because they won't let me, but they'll let me teach you when you're little. I want to say I was kind of scanning through different parts of the book the other day, and I want to say I read something where at like the end of part, 2 of the book, Joe kind of, whether Joe says it in like, whether she actual dialogue or not, but like, he pretty much says it like Joe was happy to run a school, like that she kind of wanted to write a book and then like, I'll be a teacher. And she was totally okay with that.
Yeah.
I don't know if like people think, like, oh, she's not like this world renowned author that she's talked about wanting to be for her whole life. She's just a teacher. That's what she wanted. She's very happy with her school for boys.
When Joe and Frederick are engaged, there's this whole long paragraph where she tells her family how she has this idea for the school and how Frederick is going to teach there and her father is going to help him and she's going to nurse all these boys and be this happy mama for the lost boys. Yeah, like she definitely wanted that. And then I did some research on Louisa May Alcott. And one of her dreams when she was in her mid-20s was to start a school with Henry Thoreau. And that kind of makes sense because, Henry passed away before Louisa wrote Little Woman, but then she kind of inserted this dream that she had to Joe's and Friedrich's character. Louisa May Alcott, she knew a lot of teachers, a lot of female teachers who she supported their work. It was very important for her, not just for girls' education, but education for all kids. It was something that she was very supportive. I think she even sponsored schools for orphans.
Well, she was surrounded by such this array of just intellectual people. She lived, obviously, her father, when his aspirations of being an author, I don't mean to laugh at that. I mean, her father is his own story. But your friends when, the Emersons and, Thoreaus. I mean,
Oh, the big names.
Yeah, Hawthorne's. And I mean, even where she's buried in Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, she's buried in a location called Author's Ridge. When we were there in Massachusetts, we were there in Concord. What's really nice is that area at least we're Orchard House. It doesn't seem very like populated. Like it's very green. It's not industrialized. It still feels like back then. And I mean, everybody's house was like a stone's throw away from each other. I mean, not even a mile up the street from Orchard House and there's Nathaniel Hawthorne's house, which they lived in at one point. Emerson's house was very close by as well. Everything was just right there. She was just surrounded by these people, these like-minded people, or whether, she grew up and was influenced by them, by her parents. So it would make sense that, that would be reflected, or even like there's a line, not for Joe, but I know I've seen it in one of the movies. It may have been the PBS miniseries, but I believe in the book when they're doing Camp Lawrence, Meg is in one of the boats with Kate and John, Kate Vaughn. And it kind of looks down at like governesses. I think the scene is John asks about like a poem or whatever that he had like translated into German. And the subject eventually gets to like, Kate going like, oh, well, you should just ask your governess. Like if you don't know the answer to something or if you still need help. And Meg's response is like, well, I am a governess. And I like that John kind of comes to her defense. And the way I read this, not only is John, showing, his a bit, it's a way of him showing his affection for Meg, but it's also showing like there's nothing wrong with being governed. I believe Louisa was a governess at one point.
Yes, she and her sister Anna, I think, were both governesses.
It's like saying, there's nothing wrong with this without flat out saying this. So that readers should be like, oh, there is nothing wrong with governance. Yes. Or like, oh, maybe I should be nicer to my governess.
That is one of my favorite John and Meg scenes, the way he comes to her defense.
There are also a couple, like, as I've gotten older, it's like as much as I want to see more of the arcs between, Joe and Friedrich and like Amy and Laurie, I wish like the films gave more attention to Meg and John. And it's one of those things where I feel, or I wonder, because, again, like they get married and it's like as soon as they get married, like that's it. You don't see them a lot. Like the next time you see them, oh, they've had babies. And in the 49, they are infants. Like they're still babies. And it's like these children were older than this. And there's like a whole chapter like dedicated Meg and John and their domestic experience. Again, that's what it's called. It's called domestic experiences. And I love that chapter because it's not just Meg trying to make jelly. It's not just, John friend home on that day when like everything goes wrong. It's not just the overcoat and the fact that she spent all this money on linen or on material. You get to meet these little children. There's like this great part where like Meg cannot, for whatever reason, like reason with her son. And she's having such a hard time. And then John's like, well, let me do it. She's like, yo, like, you're the father. Like, this is my job. Bonnie's like, he's their dad. Let him help. And in a way that also, people always, I think, focus on how modern, like, Jo feels, like, how she wants to be the writer with her independence. But, like, back then, I mean, I'm sure there were fathers in that time period that were involved in their children's lives. But for the most part, rearing children was for women. Women took care of the children. It's this sneaky way of Alcott saying, dads can do stuff too. Dads are just as important.
Yeah. I think there's a scene in Little Man where Friedrich is like holding, I can't remember which son it was, but Jo is like in awe when she's watching him playing with his son.
Yeah, well, I think that's what what you're saying with Friedrich. I think that's why it's kind of nice that for the most part, I feel like every time we're introduced to him in the movies, he's playing with Kitty and Minnie, or he's playing with Kitty, Minnie, Franz, and me.
The 1949 film, we are introduced him when he's the bear there, and the kids are playing around him, and it's so sweet.
Yeah, and so it's showing you kind of like right there, he's good with children, because I'm sure there were always the exception. I don't think, we're all human, so I mean that there are men today that are like, I'm not going to take care of kids, but there are also women that are like that. And so I can't remember where I saw it, but I feel like I read someplace that something said sometimes that Little Women feels like a how-to guide, how to grow up. And so like if that's the case, like, you could see like, yeah, this book appeals to men as well. You don't always hear that as much, but there are men who do, and they do like it. It's just there's so many things that like they get, and there's stuff that they don't get, and you're just like, one of these days, I don't know, I feel with like the adaptions, what they need is, this needs to be like a TV series.
I agree.
It needs to be something where the actors can change as they get older, and they really it shouldn't even just be a Little Women TV series. It should be like a March Saga or something. Yeah. Where they continue on, as you can really kind of like the grand scope. Because I feel like so many people Like, if you were to say, well, like, Little Women's part of a trilogy, they'd be like, what are you talking about? No, it's not. Yes, it is. Listen, there's 2 other books that come after it. You should read them. They're good.
In my ideal version, we would also see Laurie like growing up in these boarding schools in Europe, and then Fredrik living in Berlin. So we would actually be introduced to their characters, or Fredrik's character as well, in the beginning. Yeah, that would be my 3 series.
It's been a joke, I think, where I've seen where it's like, you know, when it comes to fandom, like books being adapted or what have you, and like the joke is something to the effect of, you really think I'm going to sit here and watch a like 600-hour mini series of my favorite work of literature that's going to get every single minute detail in there? Of course I'm going to. Like, gosh, I will watch every version of this movie that ever comes out. Like, anything that I find that has like remotely anything to do with Little Women, I'm like, oh, look, I'm going to read this. I'm going to look at this. You know, I may not always like what I read. I think I heard in, I was listening to some of your previous podcasts, and I have read a book that I think you will never read, and it is the Joe and Laurie book.
Oh, no. No, I am not going to read it.
It was very interesting, because I will say this about it. Even in reading it, you still kind of feel like Joe is like, I don't really want to be with Laurie, but I want to be with it. Well, you know, it was definitely different. And the way they do it is kind of interesting. I had no idea what to expect with that book. It's kind of like Joe is supposed to be Louisa, where she writes the first half of Little Women, and then she's kind of stuck. She doesn't like her, you know, her editor's like, we want more. And Joe in the book is like, we haven't lived the rest of it yet. Beth had already died in this. Like, there was no Beth anymore. And Meg and John even like aren't really a couple. And so Meg's even kind of like, I can't believe you used our names. And like, I don't even know if John like likes, like, how could you do this to me? And it's like, what are you going to do? Are you going to get a big Nick is married? And then Joe's like, well, maybe they'll have twins or something. I don't know. Like, it's kind of strange.
It sounds like bad fan fiction.
It is pretty much fan fiction. I mean, you know, it's published fan fiction. I read a very long time ago. If you laugh, you would think about it. I don't even have this book anymore, and I hardly remember it. But there was this period of time where some books like literature and this, and I have read Little Women and Werewolf.
Wow.
I guess I disliked it enough where I was like, I don't know if I could read Little Women vampires, but at this point, I actually would actually really like to reread the werewolf one and the vampire one. Just that book was special. I haven't read it yet. I have like the modern it's a modern day take called like Meg and Joe.
Oh, I read that one. I didn't really care for it that much. I think Joe's character was very different novel. But I think it did pretty good job with Meg and John, so I think you might like that part.
Okay. I get a crack out of the fact that that particular author, I have read some of her books before, but the books that I have read of hers have been some of her paranormal romance books.
Interesting.
So I was kind of surprised that, one, she wrote something that was based off of Little Women. It's also very strange sometimes that she's in, like, I think the Louisa May Alcott group on Facebook. So there's this part of me every now and then, like, I see her commenting and I'm like, I know she's not my friend, but I'm like, I'm in this group with this author that, like, I read her books. But I have some of one of the things that I've noticed recently when it comes to like fictional adaptions is for young adults or even the group right beneath them, they've been coming out with like comic adaptions. And I have 2 of them, one of which I've read. But what I find interesting, and I think this stems from like the whole, you know, Joe saying that, you know, she's disappointed in not being a boy, is they always make Joe like a lesbian, her like bisexual. And I have nothing I'm like I have nothing against, I'm a big supporter of those comedic. I think that's great, but it's interesting that that's that take that they make. Or she's mad about not being a boy, so this is automatically what we think.
Yeah, I always thought it was very strange because in Little Woman, Jo has very misogynist views towards women, and she doesn't really like to hang out with women that much, except her sisters. I'm just rereading the part 2, just finished Calls, but before that, there's this chapter where the narrator says that the reason why she wanted to hang out with Laurie was that Laurie opened the world to the men's world so that Jo could immerse herself with the company of men.
Yeah, and I mean maybe it's a way for like with these with the newer fiction, maybe it's a way for them to like associate with modern day audiences. I mean, with one of the Little Women, one of the comics, they're a blended family, and they end up also being a biracial family.
It's maybe because I read so many or done this research on Louisa's relationship with Henry Thoreau and then Ladislav Wisniewski. For me, Jo's and Frederick's relationship, it's sort of self-explanatory because of that. Because the adaptations tend to focus so much on the childhood aspect, there has not been that much studies made about relationships within Little Woman with, Meg and John and John Frederick and Amy and Laurie. And the studies tend to also focus to the childhood part of the story. In the 1949 film and in the 1933 film, the feedback scene, I think it's a lot of ways closer to the book because Jo and Frederick are not arguing. And I think it's weird, like you said, like they never show Laurie and Jo arguing in the films, but they show Jo and Frederick arguing in the films. But then in the book, Jo and Frederick, they do not argue.
It's one of the things I kind of like about the 94 version. I do like where you at least see them almost like working together. They're trying to build that relationship. You kind of see them working together. And I think he said this before when it comes to like the 2018 version, that they kind of do it like the best with him being her editor. I love the scene when they're in, I think it's the library, and she's just kind of going off on a rant. And his response is like, this, like, I want more of this. I believe it's the 1978. I like what they do with the relationship is you at least see Friedrich and Jo like writing letters. He can read in between the lines. Like at one point he's like it's almost like he realizes that Beth's dying. But it's like, I wish I could just take like little pieces from each mediate spell together. Like, you got this right. You got this right. I mean, sometimes I'm kind of surprised when I find myself enjoying the William Shatner Professor Mayor.
Well, they were way too argumentative in that version. But Jo even got to write to New York Post, after, her time with him.
Well, I think it's important, to her art, whether it's with her writing and with her growing as a person, like when she meets him, it definitely helps. He's this contrast to her where he's very mellow. Not that he's not passionate about things, but he's not as like loud as Jo is.
Yeah.
He kind of helps bring that out of her, and she kind of helps bring him out of his shell. And I know we talked about it like the other day, and I don't know if I was like surprised that you knew what it was, but I think one of the best instances where you kind of see this is in the musical. I absolutely adore, I mean, I love the musical itself, but with their relationship, with Jo and Friedrich's, I love his song "How But I Am" because, a lot of times with the movies, you obviously can see the influence that Friedrich had on Jo. we see that argument, that scene where they fight. And, the way the movies portray it is that, she then, when she goes home, her sister passes, she then writes, according to the movie, she either writes Little Women or she writes My Beth. I think in the 49 version, she writes My Beth. And it's like me, Friedrich was at like that push in the right direction. It's like a light bulb went off. Maybe I really can write these other works. And so to see that influence he has, but you never really see it the other way around. You never see her influence on him. And that song in the musical is just so perfect with that, where pretty much telling you in the song, like, he almost makes himself seem kind of boring in a way.
Yeah.
Where like he just likes to go about his daily life and just, do his thing. But like now that he's met her, like he notices, like, he's different. He hums.
And then his students are like, "You're so happy now."
Thank you so much for listening. See you next time. Take care and make good choices. Bye.